So once again, I want to extend my thanks to all of you that submitted your questions for the weekly NFL Draft Q&A. As you know, this one got split up into two separate videos because there were so many questions. I appreciate the response. Thank you. And each week leading up to the draft, if we get this many questions, then you know what? We are going to do it like this again. So have at it, huh? All right, so let's go ahead and get kicked off with part 2. And Scott Ford is going to start us off by asking, what's your favorite football movie? I know this is not necessarily a draft-related question, but I thought it was an interesting question nonetheless. So I wanted to talk about it here. For me, it is really hard to beat out the original Brian song with James Caan and Billy D. Williams. It is also really hard to beat out Remember the Titans. It really is. Now, for some of you sick fucks, you might say, like, unnecessary roughness or something, just to be wise asses. The Program is also really, really, really hard to beat out. Like, really hard. Like, if I was doing a Mount Rushmore of football movies, Brian's song, Remember the Titans, The Program, and what would be the fourth one? Maybe the original Longest Yard? Maybe? That's tough. So I flipped this back to you guys as something to answer in the comments of this video. What's your favorite football movie, or more so, what would be on your Mount Rushmore of football movies? Like, to me, I'm absolutely resolute on the top 3 have to be Brian's song, has to be there. Remember the Titans has to be there. And I think The Program has to be there. The fourth one I'm a little bit more flexible on, but I feel like my Rushmore would be pretty good. Jeff's ego. Again, my ego's so big it's got his own Twitter handle, and because it's my ego, it has several questions, some of which weren't even answered here because there was too damn many. First, will the Dolphins draft a quarterback in the first round this year? I think that's a chance. I think it is a possibility for sure. If a quarterback is there that they like at 11, they're picking him. Because honestly, what has Tannehill done over the course of his 6 years of his career that makes you think, as he's getting ready to approach the age of 30 damn near, that he's that type of dude for you, and he's the guy that you feel like you could build a championship team around. Especially when you look at a team that's in some trouble in terms of salary cap situation. It would allow them a potential out from Tannehill's contract after 2018. There's got to be a possibility. And it feels like it's Baker Mayfield if it's going to be a guy. Now, the question is, do the Dolphins, I think this is the real question, is do the Dolphins want to move up into the top 5 or somewhere else in the top 10 to make sure that they get their guy for fear of somebody like Arizona jumping them and getting a quarterback? I think that's the interesting question that goes along with this. But I think there's definitely a chance that the Dolphins draft a QB in round 1. I really do. Then the next question, what round will the Patriots take a quarterback? I've got to believe, based off of the history of the last 2 guys that they drafted of note, in Jimmy Garoppolo and Jacoby Brissett, that it's going to be somewhere on day 2. I feel like it's going to be somewhere on day 2. Now, for me, with them picking at 31, if they really like a guy, they should just go ahead and take him because they get the 5th-year team option. To me, that's the sensible way to do it. If you really, truly like a guy and you like that quarterback maybe more than anybody else on the board. Because you do have to think about life after Brady for the health of the organization. Now, maybe Belichick doesn't give a crap and he'll just spend a day 3 pick on one, and he might not care. And he might not. But I'd find it hard-pressed to believe that they don't take somebody like a Laletta on day 2. I'd be really hard-pressed to think that they won't. And then the last question from my ego is, where do you want the draft to be next year? Great question. From a proximity standpoint, to me being here in Richmond, Virginia, I'd like it to be somewhere where I might be able to go to the draft next year. Like I could sit there and drive and not have to worry about a whole bunch of travel arrangements, just basically drive up and book a hotel room for the weekend. That'd be freaking awesome. So somewhere like DC, Baltimore, Charlotte would allow me to do that. I don't know if any of those are in the consideration or the talk for 2019, but I would most certainly be happy as hell if it was held in one of those 3 locations, because again, I could drive there. I suppose I technically could with Pittsburgh, but I mean, ultimately, who the hell wants to go to Pittsburgh? I've been there before. It's not that bad. I mean, it's not like it's Cleveland, for God's sakes. But those would be the 3 ideal locations for me: DC, Baltimore, Charlotte, because they're the NFL cities that are the closest to me. Vols fan, is Lamar Jackson having his mom represent him hurting his draft stock? Yes. I understand the thought process behind, you got to be careful who you trust. You might trust your parents. Sometimes that's a dumb decision. You might also not see the immediate benefit or value when you talk about the slotting of NFL draft picks and their money as to why you want to give away 3% of that to an agent. I get that. And it's all ridiculous logic. As a quarterback, especially any prospect, but specifically a quarterback, with all the things that you have to worry about through this whole interview process, you need somebody to handle as many of the logistical elements for you as possible and be competent and confident in what they are doing. Unless his parents, his mom, his dad, whoever, are professional agents or have experience as lawyers and experience in contract negotiations and such, then they have absolutely zero business handling this for the young man. I love Lamar Jackson as a prospect, and I hate to see him sell himself short. This is one of these short-term, long-term type of things. Short-term, you're losing 3% to an agent. Long-term, that agent serves as your freaking hype man, as your point of contact for teams that can help increase your draft stock. So that way, whereas you have your parents representing you, you might not even end up in round 1. The agent does a good enough job of leveraging and negotiating and putting the bug out there for you, where you end up being a top 20 pick and you make millions of dollars more. Therefore, more than justifying the 3%. Not to mention, as a young quarterback coming into the league, there are going to be endorsement opportunities and all these other things, appearances. You need an agent to be able to sort through all of that, and help you get through that. There's sometimes you could say just because the way things have always been done doesn't mean it's the way it always needs to be. And I will say, if you are in the NBA and you are LeBron James, technically you don't need an agent. You are going to get the maximum contract wherever you want to go. So why would you give somebody 3%? That makes sense. As a rookie trying to establish and affirm his draft position, trying to set himself up in the league, set himself up for the success, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And it is borderline retarded to sit there and trust your mommy and your daddy to handle this big business. And I would say that about any of these other prospects as well. Like I said, unless those parents have experience in these type of scenarios and situations, they have legal experience, they are lawyers, they are professional negotiators, things like that. But just because they're your mom and dad, that is a dumbass reason to have them represent you. And when you hear reports of teams are having trouble being able to contact Lamar Jackson and being able to set up meetings with him and workouts with him and such, this is why you pay that agent 3%. It is ridiculous and it's frustrating because it's going to hurt his draft stock, and I believe it has. Daryl 0 asks, what's going to be the biggest day one surprise of the draft? It could be 4 quarterbacks going in the top 5, although I don't know how surprising that is. Somebody like a Harold Landry going in the top 10 could be a surprise. Minkah Fitzpatrick dropping out of the top 10 I think will be a surprise to many in the draft media and on draft Twitter, but it shouldn't be. I'm not sure what the single biggest surprise yet. In a couple of weeks, I will probably know for sure. Zach Powers, your thoughts on the Lions free agent signings? If I'm being really honest with you, I can't remember who they signed outside of LeGarrette Blount. I cannot remember. So, that tells you what type of impact it's had on me. Not saying that's a bad thing. I know they've probably signed somebody else, and I'm just drawing a blank right now. But the most notable one I remember is LeGarrette Blount. So, yeah, shame on me for not remembering better, but they just didn't move me or have much of an impact on me. So, there you go. Samaj Anderson, your thoughts on Lorenzo Carter. Is he an edge, or is he a regular linebacker? Where will he go? Does he make sense for the Vikings? To me, he's best served as an edge linebacker in a 3-4 or a Sam backer in a 4-3. Where will he go? I think somewhere between the mid-20s to pick 40 or so is probably his landing spot. Now, I probably will have a slightly higher grade on him, but I feel like in reality that's probably his range is 25 to 40 or maybe 45. So he's in a pretty good place. Outside chance of round 1, probably safe in the first half of round 2. And as far as the Vikings, does he make sense? Maybe. But you already have Anthony Barr. Do you want another of a similar type of player? I'm just saying. Paulie Paul. If Lamar Jackson falls to 28, is he the guy for the Steelers? If he's there at 28, the Steelers have to consider him or put out enough of a smokescreen that they really like him, which would be what I would be doing, preparing for that possibility, because you might get somebody like Arizona or somebody else who missed out on the quarterback on the first go-around to be able to get the best of the rest, would be the thought process with Lamar. And you might be able to get a nice price out of that pick 28 and trade back out of that position. So he could be the guy, but he could also be the guy that helps facilitate a trade back for the Steelers to get some additional picks. And if that's the case, then they need to start putting out that smoke screen now. Elusive Tiger, what are your round 1 shockers? Round 1 shockers right now would be, at this very moment, Josh Allen going before Josh Rosen. Now, these are varying levels of shock factor, granted. So Josh Allen going before Josh Rosen would certainly be one. Harold Landry going in the top 10 would probably be another. Minkah Fitzpatrick dropping out of the top 10 would probably be another. Lamar Jackson potentially falling entirely out of round 1 could be another shocker. Somebody trading up into the top 10 for Baker Mayfield could be another surprise. And yes, I think that's still a surprise because somebody would be trading up into the top 10 for a 6-foot quarterback with some off-the-field issues. To me, that's still a surprise. That the first wide receiver off the board won't be Calvin Ridley. That if there's a third running back to go in the first round, or even a second running back to go in the first round, it might be Sony Michel, and it might not be Darius Geis. And if it's Geis number 2, it will be Michel number 3. Those are just some of the ones that I can think of as surprises and shocks early on. Space Bowboy 17. Thoughts on the top? Was that Space Cowboy? Or did I just type and that was supposed to be Space Cowboy? Either way, thoughts on the top wide receivers in this class? Any deserving of first-round picks? There are a couple to me that are worthy of first-round picks. I call it specifically Calvin Ridley from Alabama, Anthony Miller from Memphis. In terms of my thoughts on the wide receivers in this class, you should probably check out the scouting reports for the big-name wide receivers that I have up on this channel now, and that'll give you some better insight and why I feel that way about those guys. Ronnie Simmons, do you feel like Derwin James could hang as a boundary corner? No. That's not where he's best suited. He should be an in-the-box type of safety with some range type, like a Landon Collins type. Or if you feel like you want to play him at free safety, an Eric Berry type. I'm not trying to play him at corner. It's safety all the way for him. That's where he's best suited, and that's where he could have the most impact. Kevin Sheridan, do you watch Brett Coleman, a.k.a. the real most underrated sports guy here on YouTube? First of all, Kevin, fuck you, because that's me. Number 2, honestly, no, I don't. But he probably is underrated, because there are plenty of them that are. He's surely probably one of them. But I don't recall watching much of his stuff. But I'll be real, I don't watch a ton of other people's stuff. So that's nothing personal or anything like that. But he probably is underrated. But he's not underrated as this guy, okay? Anyways, that's it for part 2 of this Q&A. Thanks once again to all of you that submitted your questions for this week's edition. We'll be coming back around next week and doing another one. So make sure you have those questions ready. And when I ask for them, you pounce all over it, all right? Later.